Thank you everybody for joining us, and welcome back to another episode of the InterDrone podcast, your 30,000-foot view of the commercial drone industry. My name is CJ Smith. I am joined today with my colleague and InterDrone's conference producer, Leslie Wolf. And our special guest today is Dr. Tulinda Larsen. She wears a number of hats. She is the executive director of the Utah Advanced Materials and Manufacturing Initiatives, the UAM Editor at Airinsight. She's an advisor to Deseret UAS. She is a pilot and much more. So thank you so much for being here, Tulinda. Can you just give us a brief overview? I tried to allude to some of your kind of credentials and why we're so excited to have you on today. But if you could just give the listeners a brief overview of who you are and some of the work that you do in the industry.
Of course. And again, thank you so much for having me. I have been in the commercial piloted aviation industry for more than 40 years. And in 2016, I pivoted to remotely piloted, obstinately piloted, or autonomous aircraft. You notice I'm trying to avoid that word manned. Anyway, so in 2016, I had sold a software company that worked on airline on-time performance, and I had a lot of non-compete. So a friend of mine said, you really should check out drones, which I did. So September 1, 2016, so ironic because I really didn't know anything about 107 when I set up my DBA, a Skylark Drone Research. And the very first thing I did to educate myself on this new drone industry was to go to InterDrone. Okay. So my InterDrone was 2016. And I was dazzled. I could not believe there was 3,600 people there. And the only two people I knew was the FAA administrator and one other executive with Harris. So for me, it was eye-opening that I'd been 40 years in this industry, we call aviation and aerospace. And this whole new ecosystem had evolved that had people that came from completely different walks of life and outside of the aviation industry to create this vibrant, new, dynamic field of drones. So that's how I got started. So I went to actually that year, because remember there were a lot of conferences back then, eight conferences after InterDrone to educate myself. And then in the spring of 2017, I decided to get a drone. I got a Phantom 4 Pro, and I became the drone pilot for the Annapolis Yacht Club Sailing Race Committee. And that's how I learned to fly my drone, which I don't recommend. I really think training, and you probably should not do it over water. I lost 2 drones. But I learned a lot, and I learned it fast.
I bet, yeah.
I was able to then, in 2018, I did a keynote at U.S. Sailing on how to use drones in sailboat race management. So in addition, I have a doctorate of management at University of Maryland. So I teach at Embry-Riddle Aeronautical University. I wanted to teach in the unmanned systems programs, but they had plenty of adjunct professors in that program, and they really needed economists. So my other degrees are in economics. So I teach macroeconomics on the undergraduate level and global economics on the graduate level at Embry-Riddle. So I came out to Utah in the summer of 2018 to head up a group called Deseret UAS, which was still is a public-private partnership set up by the state of Utah to foster regional economic development by encouraging companies to come test their aircraft and eventually settle in Utah to do their production. The whole thing is about jobs. And then I was offered this great opportunity at the beginning of this year to move over to executive director, as you had mentioned, of Utah Advanced Materials and Advanced Manufacturing Initiative. And that's code for composites. So one of the reasons they were very interested in bringing me on as executive director is my deep understanding of both the less than 55-pound drones, and then the urban air mobility, which now, according to NASA, is called advanced air mobility, and according to the Air Force are orbs, but they're passenger carrying larger aircraft that are electric and are autonomous in many of their features, although they may be optionally piloted. And the reason they brought me over for that specific expertise is the rest of the composites. That's the other code, is really, we're talking about composites and carbon fiber. The rest of that market is in aerospace and aviation, and that has fairly well plateaued even before COVID-19. Now it's actually in a decline. And this group had enough vision to understand that the future for composites would be in these drones and these larger passenger carrying electric eVTOL aircraft. Mm-hmm. So that's how I joined. And it's basically an association, although we don't have members, but we advocate for the advanced materials and manufacturing industry in Utah, of which 85% of all the composites are made in Utah for the United States. So
is that your home state originally?
I'm sorry, could you repeat that?
Is that your home state originally?
Utah? No, my home state is, I guess my home state is New York. I was born and raised on Long Island, but then I moved down to Virginia for really my professional career. I did my undergraduate and master's at George Washington University, my doctorate at University of Maryland. So I have been in Maryland and Virginia area since 1972.
Okay, great.
But I moved out here, as I said, in summer of 2018, out to Utah.
Great. And you haven't looked back yet?
Well, I go back and forth because I still have a husband back east. I do go back and forth in different travel climate than we are in today with COVID.
Right. No kidding. Well, thanks again for being here, Tulinda. And Tulinda is also on the board of InterDrone, so we're super excited to have her here today. We also just want to take a really quick minute to pay respects to our friends at AirMap. Wanted to read a quick tweet from one of their founders, Ben Marcus. He said, last night, the office in Santa Monica was consumed by fire. He says, thankfully, nobody was hurt. He does say what hurts is the unending racism and injustice in America. We all must work harder to make our union more perfect. We're all brothers and sisters. Let's treat each other with love, respect, and dignity, and create opportunity for all those who make a positive impact. So obviously thoughts going out to AirMap and their team.
Absolutely. And what an innovative company to take really concepts that were so visionary back in 2016, just when we created this commercial drone market. And now it's global. They are such an impressive company, and it hurts a lot to see what happened to them. His words are very heartfelt, and I agree with you. It's nice to take a pause and recognize what they've accomplished and their mission going forward. And I think he encapsulates what we all are feeling these days.
Right. Absolutely. No, I think he said it very well, and very eloquently. So thoughts going out to the AirMap team, and of course George Floyd and his family. But we are here to talk about drones. So we have 4 great articles we want to get to today, and we will then jump into our interview with Dr. Larsen. So the first article on the list, some really interesting and encouraging news coming out of India. So the DGCA, which stands for the Directorate General of Civil Aviation, they've permitted 10 entities to pilot remote drone surveillance and delivery. So at least 10 consortia, one of which is actually a Google-backed company, have been permitted by the DGCA to carry out BVLOS operations in designated airspaces across the country. This is being done under an effort by the DGCA to formulate regulations around commercial BVLOS drone operations. and the regulator in India is looking at these projects to gain insights into such operations. So
maybe you should pause. Yeah, we make the assumption everybody knows what BVLOS is, but it's beyond visual line of sight, which has always been a very critical constraint on the use of commercial drones, that you had to keep the drone within visual line of sight of the operator/pilot. It really limits the full economic benefit.
What we can do. Right. So, Dr. Larsen, how excited are you to see a country like India start to do these sorts of tests and to really make a concerted effort to go and regulate BVLOS drone operations effectively?
Oh, it's a huge step forward. All of the initiatives around the world, but particularly this because it starts at a governmental level.
Mm-hmm.
As I said, we really don't achieve the full economic benefits of operations of drones. And let's define drones as less than 55-pound aircraft for right now.
Okay.
And their ability to do inspections and to agriculture and a large number of use cases are very limited by not being able to go beyond the visual line of sight. So this is I feel like it really started with Precision Hawk and their extended line of sight, and then their BVLOS project with the FAA. Oh, that's now almost 5 years ago that they had that project underway, and that was the foundation. And now to see a government agency picking it up and really fostering it and fanning the flames of innovation is fabulous.
Yeah. We actually in the States we saw a waiver for BVLOS waiver for I believe it was a surveying company, or maybe it was infrastructure inspection, but we actually saw a BVLOS waiver here in the States during the pandemic too. So we're starting to see a little bit of movement, which is really exciting. And like you said, this is a huge piece of unlocking, unmanned systems potential in the country.
Correct.
And also on the podcast last week, we spoke about India, and they're actually kind of advanced when it comes to remote ID as well. They have what they're calling an ownership acknowledgement number and then a drone acknowledgement number. And I think when I was reading this other article, it said that both hobbyists and commercial users, any drone owner had to register their drone by the end of January earlier this year to be included kind of on that list of approved unmanned aircraft. So it's interesting to see India really kind of leading the way with regards to remote ID, or at least their solution for it. And then we're also seeing now BVLOS, and it's exciting to see all that innovation. Our second article on the list. So people are flying drones over Darwen fire and stopping helicopters from addressing those fires. So this is coming from small town England. I think just the general concept of this article is really what we want to be talking to. I mean,
yeah, there are places that drones should not be.
Right.
And in any natural disaster, even the social disturbances we have going on right now, if you're a hobbyist, you should not be flying your drone in any adverse condition that impacts our first responders.
Yeah, and this kind of reminded me of the issues that happen when there are natural disasters, and many pilots, but a lot of hobbyists kind of fly over the area and end up doing more harm than good because they're kind of clogging the airspace. And so obviously highlighting the need for effective UTM so that people kind of know what's going on in the airspace and know to avoid a certain area. I know in the US also it is illegal to interfere with any sort of like firefighting effort. I guess this was in England, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Perhaps different.
Yeah. So how does the industry kind of mitigate these challenges? What is the answer to
education, and remote ID?
Yeah.
I don't know who it is, but yes, education, and that's where there is See, even at InterDrone, of course, you're focusing on commercial. There is not a good forum for the hobbyists. They go to AMA, the Academy of, what is it? Aerospace. Anyway, AMA is the hobbyist for mainly remote control aircraft, but they don't want drones. I mean, I've been a member of AMA, and I was told I was a token, and I wasn't sure if it was because I was a woman or I was a quadcopter operator. I never really knew. I think that is starting to change, but to be honest, we need to do a lot of education, and I'm right now in my career very much looking at starting the education on our industry in kindergarten, really starting young. And we need the workforce at the end of the stream of the workforce pathway. We need talented workforce. And my granddaughter who's in kindergarten, they asked them all what they wanted to be, and they wanted to be astronauts and doctors and artists and mommies and teachers, because that's the only jobs they see.
Right.
So education, I'm serious, starting at a very young age and encouraging hobbyist use of drones.
Yeah.
Even both of my grandkids, I give my grandkids drones all the time, and I help them fly and teach them. But it is education.
That's great. Yeah, right. And I think it's another challenging thing too, is a lot of times there are hobbyists that their intentions are all in the right places, and their heart's in the right places, and they're trying to help a situation, but they're actually potentially getting in the way. So yeah, I think education is what we keep looking back.
Say there's three types, right? There's the uninformed, and the unintentional, people who didn't need to do it, they didn't understand, and then the ones who were deliberately
the bad actors. Yeah,
bad actors. And that's the three. Not much you can do with the bad actors. That's where the fines and the penalties come in. But
Right.
The uninformed and the unintentional, you can work with them.
Right. Something that's come up a couple of times on this podcast when it comes to rules and regulation is that laws, regulations, they're there for the good actors, right? A bad actor is not going to follow rules or regulations regardless. So, you have to put those into place, assuming everyone's acting well. And then for people that are intentionally acting poorly, you have to do another type of kind of framework there to punish or to deter. So.
And of course, there is a challenge because drones are aircraft. And I don't think anywhere in the world, certainly not in the United States, you're not allowed to shoot down aircraft and or aircraft. So you can't disable or shoot down the drone in the bad situation. So that is an enforcement challenge.
We actually, on this podcast, spoke about somebody who shot down a drone and was charged with a felony for doing so. Right.
Exactly.
It's the same regulations for interfering with a
regular aircraft.
Any type of aircraft, right? A manned aircraft. So,
right. Piloted.
Right.
Right, we're getting rid of manned.
Yeah, sorry. You said that at the beginning. I apologize. So some good news coming from our third article on the list. So this is talking about how drones are actually able to help find a missing child. I think there's even a TV show called The First 48, but this article reiterates that the first 48 hours of a missing person, especially a missing child or a missing minor, are absolutely critical. This company, Skyscopes, within 20 minutes of receiving the call, they said that they had teams on site ready to take flight. They were equipped with the most advanced cameras, optical gas imaging, thermal sensors, and they were providing aerial views through process of elimination that could show where the child was or where it wasn't. I think anytime we see drones being used for something, overtly positive like this is obviously great and really encouraging. What are your guys' thoughts on kind of the effectiveness of drones to find missing people, whether it's a missing child, whether it's a potential perpetrator or criminal? Is this something that you guys have seen before? Or is this something we can expect to see more of for law enforcement and different public safety agencies?
Absolutely. Here in Utah, when I was executive director of Deseret UAS, we went out into the desert and we got I think it was 3,000 pound nitrogen tanker truck that released the cold. It was a cold cloud, and we had a fireman fully outfitted in a hazmat suit walking through it. You could not see him at all with our eyes. And then we put some drones up. It was so super cool to see that heat signature is so easy to pick up with the right technologies. And now the way that the FLIR cameras and the adaptations to even smaller drones make it possible for every local fire department, police department, search and rescue to have drones on hand that can go out and do the heat sensing.
Right.
Yeah, and I've definitely seen other news reports. Like I think a hiker was found via the use of drones. But this article specifically was cool because it reminded me of something Charles Warner said. We just had Charles Warner of Drone Responders was on our most recent webinar, and he kicked off the webinar by saying, if you're in charge of a team, you're going to do whatever you can also to make sure that your team is not being put in harm's way. And they had an entire team searching for this child, but in the midst of a pandemic, they were able to use drones to kind of keep their team as safe as possible. And it ended up being obviously extremely efficient. I mean, they found the child pretty quickly. So this is just another, great use case for drones, potentially also beyond the pandemic.
Yeah, and it doesn't have to be a super expensive customized drone. That's another nice evolution of the technology, is that the heat sensing cameras, the infrared, are now getting smaller and more affordable and can go on smaller, more affordable drones. So
right.
To answer your question, absolutely, this is going to be a growing area for use of drones.
Right. Yeah, no, yeah, it's exciting to see these new use cases. And this fourth article kind of touches back on the pandemic and the effect it's been having on the industry. I hate to say almost in a positive way, but there is an odd silver lining for the industry that it's been kind of as we've been going through the pandemic. So this is specifically talking about countries in the Middle East, and specifically in the GCC, which is the Gulf Cooperation Council. So a number of the construction firms out there and real estate developers are using drone technology as they start to kind of get their operations back on track. So a lot of this construction work was paused during the coronavirus pandemic. And as these companies are starting to do their work again, they're actually turning to the use of drones. One of the developers over there noted that drones can cut project costs by up to 12%. They can cut the time used to basically compile information, list, do inventory tasks. They can cut that amount of time by 32%. And then in addition, since drones can conduct repeat flights or consistently monitor the construction progress and status, the possibility of doing manual rework decreases by 25%. So, this is a specific example of drones being used to help companies kind of phase out of the coronavirus pandemic. But, on the broader level, we've just seen so many innovative use cases, and we've seen some waivers, like we saw the BVLOS waiver due to the pandemic. I mean, what ways have you guys really seen the pandemic impact the industry, either for positive, and again, I hate to use the word positive, but to either with kind of increasing the speed of things that are happening, or we're seeing new use cases and larger companies that weren't using drones start to use them more to get their operations back on track? What are some of your guys' high-level thoughts on that? I
think we've talked a little bit about how incredible it has been to see medical deliveries, blood transfusions, things like that take place in the U.S. that weren't via drone that weren't happening before the pandemic. So that's been very exciting to see.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, in the positive, it has pushed forward, and you probably have covered that on previous podcasts, the drone delivery. I mean, I just was reading yesterday an article about a local Dunkin' Donuts using a Mavic. That's a little aircraft to deliver touchless donuts.
Yeah, I saw that too.
That was really cute, wasn't it? So it's the whole touchless, and cars are delivering touchless, drop the keys, and a lot of those opportunities. Again, as we were talking before we went online here, the drone industry really came of age during Hurricane Harvey, which I believe was 2017, when we had Part 107 in place, but we really were just learning how to use it. And we got all those emergency exemptions, and suddenly there was a realization that these eyes in the sky are really, really valuable. And I think what's happening now with COVID-19, we're realizing how valuable drone delivery is to be touchless and to be able to break that chain of transmission of the virus, just for things and goods. And then, as you were pointing out, on the medical side, delivering samples and being there to deliver the tests, etc. So it's been very positive for the industry. A challenge has been getting your 107, right? Because you have to go into an FAA facility, but that's starting to open up. And what's really cool is all the online, all the hands-on instructions to get your 107, figured out how to do it online to get through this pandemic. But I'm so excited that Dart Drones is now back out in the field, because as I said, from my personal experience, you really need some hands-on training to operate a drone commercially, professionally, and to get the results that you're looking for. So that has been a challenge, getting that hands-on experience during this time. But again, that does seem to be opening up.
Yeah, it's interesting that you say that too, because one thing the article didn't really touch on that I would have been really curious to hear about, and I guess I could have done some side research as well, but and this is, I guess, a touchstone of InterDrone as well, is just education. And so I'm curious, as these companies either scale up their drone operations or start for the first time, what that education is looking like, because, this highlighted the efficiency, the cost savings, the safety measures that drones offer, but there is a good deal of education required to kind of build out either an in-house fleet or rely on others to be able to use drones effectively. So curious to hear how that plays out.
Yeah, and it's changing the workforce. So I didn't mention when I was introducing myself that I am the Women in Drones membership and jobs board advisor. And what we have learned, we really had a tipping point before COVID-19 in the first quarter of this year, where companies are now hiring up. We have them on our jobs board to fill career positions for drone pilots, as opposed to the way it's been going, which has been somebody in a particular function, maybe in construction, says, hey, it would be really good if we had a drone to do this job. And so they say, okay, why don't you go get a drone, get your pilot's license? And so then this very expensive executive kind of person, or technical or professional or highly trained geologist, is then doing a 107's job. And now they're learning, well, that guy should probably be running a department of expensive assets to complete the task. So we're seeing a lot more companies offering career positions as entry-level career positions for drone pilots, which is really exciting.
Yeah. I think we were talking with, I believe it was Andrew Elephant of Kitty Hawk, and he was saying that since there's a higher demand for drone pilots right now, and since nobody can take their Part 107s, he's saying that there might actually be a pilot shortage for the next 6 or so months. And do you agree with that? And what do you think the kind of repercussions are if there is a pilot shortage? more pay, higher pay for the pilots that are certified, or how do you see that playing out?
Well, I think that the floodgates are going to open shortly. I'm not sure it's going to be that long a period of time. One issue that you do hit on, higher pay. So there is an anomaly in the drone pay world where, again, in the beginning, it's so new, but in the beginning, which is 2016 until about 2018, maybe starting in 19, most drone pilots were independent. And so they were going out and bidding a job, and they were doing a job. Okay, so the job would be the preparation and product. And so we're used to getting, I don't know, $500 for a job or $1,000 a day. And now, as we're looking at career positions, we're looking at hourly salaries in the $15 to $20 an hour. And there has been some outrage. Oh, why are they paying these pilots so little? Well, they're not. Those are entry positions. That's $30,000 to $45,000 a year when you make it a full career position with benefits, and the drone is provided to the pilot, the insurance is paid for, the training is paid for. It's a whole different pay structure to have a career position versus a one-off consulting. Yeah.
Right.
And that's something everybody has to get used to, is that, and I did a paper for Women in Drones on looking at that. What do entry jobs pay? What do entry pilot jobs pay? And they are comparable to this $20, $30 an hour. And to become a commercial pilot takes an awful lot more than it does to become a commercial 107 pilot. Right.
That was actually one thing that was really interesting. I noticed, I was doing some reading, I think getting your Part 107 in the States is maybe $150 or give or take. And I think in England, it was upwards of $1,000. So that was just an interesting.
Well, but that's not right, because that's just to take the test.
Correct.
Yeah. And if you're going to be a commercial pilot, I go back to, you need your hands-on training. And that's about, standard is about $1,600 to get to the competency of being able to use the mapping software, to be able to process the data, to all of that. So that you're just talking about $150.
Correct. Just the test. I'm not saying it's $150 to be a professional drone pilot in any industry. But
it's about, to be a professional drone pilot, when you buy the drone and you pay the insurance, it's about $3,000, $4,500 to get into this market.
Okay. Interesting. Okay. Those are good ballpark numbers. I mean, a huge chunk of the InterDrone audience are pilots. So, definitely our thoughts going out to anybody who is trying to renew their 107 or was ready to take it and aren't able to right now. So, hopefully we'll all get through these times, and we'll have more pilots flying shortly. So.
But
we talked a little bit at the very beginning about your resume. I guess first question, how do you find enough time in the day to work on all these companies that you're working on? And, what's really top of mind for you right now? Where are you spending most of, your time and doing most of your work? What are you kind of most excited about as we kind of move into the second half of this year?
Well, unfortunately, I'm not flying enough. You never can fly enough. Although I did fly last weekend. I flew a friend's roof to look at her shingles. I was like, yes, I'm out of flight.
Yeah.
Number one thing for me, outside of the being executive director of UAM, is working with Women in Drones. We have really moved the needle, and it's so exciting. There are several women in droning organizations. There's Amelia Drone Heart, Women Who Drone, and Women and Drones. Women and Drones is really a whole ecosystem around elevating women in this industry, not just pilots. We started a membership program in January, And we now have some demographics on our members. 40% of them are not pilots. They are engineers, they are project management, they are marketing and sales. So that's pretty cool. But on the pilot side, we have made significant strides and turned a corner in 2019, which you may have already reported some of these numbers. But since the 107 became effective the last day of August in 2016, we have now more than 160,000 Part 107 pilots. Wow. And last year, we hit 11,000 of them as women. Now that is pretty cool. So now it's a big number of 11,000, but it only represents 6.7% of all certificated remote pilot population. But still, now women remote pilots exceed the number of women commercial pilots and women air transport pilots. So we really have, as I said, moved the needle, because we are bringing into this industry people from all walks of life. And looking at this diversity issue, while we're just measuring women, it also is a much more diverse pilot population, because there are opportunities for a wide range of capabilities and backgrounds to come in and be pilots. And it's also interesting to me that the number of pilots, the age, that the largest number of remote pilots, women remote pilots, is in the 25 to 34 year range, as opposed to, I thought it would be younger, but it's not. It's right there in the 25 to 34 year olds. Our membership actually tends to be a little older, because we are again, not all pilots. We also have deep backgrounds in the industries that we represent. Our average age is above 40. So, and we still have 80-year-olds. We have 7 80-year-old women 107 pilots, which is awesome.
Awesome.
It just proves that, and 1,300 16 to 24-year-olds. So it ranges in age, it ranges in the backgrounds of the women, and I find that is super exciting as we're in 2020.
Yeah, no, we really appreciate the work that Women in Drones does, and the organization has been with us since the very early days of InterDrone, and we've got some pretty exciting initiatives, I think, coming out for this year's show with you folks as we kind of spin up the involvement. You had mentioned to the job board. I think that's a recent initiative, right?
Yes, it is. We launched the job board in March.
Oh, great.
Yeah. When we were Sharon Rossmark, who's the founder and CEO of Women in Drones, and we were at InterDrone last year, and we had a booth, as you remember. We had our raffle, and we got a lot of inquiries of companies coming up and saying, we have jobs, but we can't find the women. So literally after the InterDrone conference last year, Sharon and I got together and said, we got to do this. We got to create a job board. So here we were in a full employment economy launching the job board. First thing we did is survey to find out what companies are looking for, what job seekers are looking for. We built the whole thing out, and now we've entered in a totally different workforce and employment landscape. But it's working. We have quite a few jobs up in there. More and more women, and it's actually both men and women, are posting their resumes and making connections. The companies that have been longest with us is Drone Hive. I don't know if you know about Drone Hive, but they are a broker for drone services, and they were actually retained by Wing, Google's drone division, to bring on 100 pilots for the Wing's drone delivery service. And they've been on our platform. And then another one is called Loveland Innovation, that does roof inspections. And they expanded their network. It's not franchise, but their offices all over the United States. And they used our job board to fill the positions in, I think it was about 6 or 8 states. And they're both very happy with the response and that the applications that they've been getting through the Women in Drones job board.
That's wonderful. Yeah, we've definitely been excited about the job board, promoting it to our audience, and then working with Sharon and Sam of Women in Drones to spin up for the first time ever, the Career Connect at InterDrone, which will be an opportunity for InterDrone audience members who are seeking employment to kind of in a professional matchmaking capacity, connect with companies who are looking to hire operators. So very excited about that.
Very excited. That was a great new addition.
Yeah, I think there's definitely a need for a little bit more targeted networking. And there's a lot of folks out there who are looking for jobs. So I think it's a great fit. Switching gears a little bit, I'm curious to hear a bit about the work that you're doing in Utah with Deseret and how Utah is kind of becoming a UAS leader.
Utah has been leading out in both on the drone market, but then also in the urban air mobility. We have a plan that's been developed by the Utah Department of Transportation for medical deliveries and to create and digitize air corridors up and down the valley, the Salt Lake City Valley, the Wasatch Front. And so we're really one of the leading states, us in North Carolina, in putting a plan into place that really starts to move forward, integrating urban air mobility into the local, the actual urban areas and up and down the corridor. And then we have our test sites where we have aircraft that are being tested and different systems. But we also have some industry-leading companies based here. I did mention Loveland Innovation, but another one is Fordham Technologies out of Provo, and they have an airspace protection program where they have the drone hunter that they send up and then can intercept any drone that is rogue drone in the airspace. It's so super cool. And they have been getting a lot of coverage. They also have some very serious backing between Boeing and Mubadala out of the United Arab Emirates. So that's another very substantial company in our space. And then the third one is a company called EP Systems, Electric Power Systems, and they're creating the batteries that are going into Bell Nexus, among many of the NASA electric aircraft. So that whole electric technology is up at the Utah State University, and the EP Systems is taking advantage of the technology that is part of the university to continue to move forward. They have a lab there that they actually blow up batteries to test them. It's so super cool. So yeah, so we are setting up the airways, we're attracting the companies, and then we're putting into place the support infrastructure, things such as the battery, airspace protection.
What's the most challenging of those three initiatives for you guys to get done?
Well, I would have originally said batteries, but they really have had some breakthroughs on the batteries. Right now, it's the COVID-19 has pulled back the state funding for some of the programs. Hopefully, we will come back out. As a matter of fact, later this month, the state legislature is meeting to go through the different funding and see what they can preserve. But the COVID-19 has upset quite a few small businesses.
Sure. Well, we hope obviously you guys come out of this sooner than later, and we continue with seeing the great work you guys are doing. Tulinda, we have one final question to wrap up, and then we will let you go for the day. I know you have a lot of things to get to. What do you think, if anything, right now is holding the industry back?
Well, it still is regulation. BVLOS is huge. Technology, I believe, is really there. The detect and avoid, the technology is really getting proven. So I would continue to say, in the near term, it's regulation. In the long term, it's workforce is going to be the big issue, because that's why I said we really have to start at kindergarten. We're competing against a lot of other industries for the talent and the talent pool.
Right.
So I think the longer term will be a workforce issue.
Right. Well, yeah, we're excited to see more kind of educational institutions start to incorporate this type of learning into their curriculums. We're seeing it at the university level, maybe a little bit at the high school level, and it sounds like you're already starting to get this kind of the kindergartners on board with it. So it's exciting to see that.
Yeah, that's where you have to start.
Yeah. Right. Well, we want to thank you again for joining us, Tulinda, and dialing in on this Tuesday morning. For anybody that has questions or they want to learn a little bit more about some of the projects you're working on, how is best for them to get in touch?
Probably the best is to email me directly and just at my name, tulinda@tulindalarsen.com.
Okay, great. And we will include that in the link include that link in the description. We will also include the link to Women in Drones and the job board. And information around this. Thanks again for joining us. This podcast will be on the InterDrone website, SoundCloud, YouTube, Spotify, wherever pods are casted. So thanks again, everybody, for tuning in. And Ms. Dr. Larsen, thanks again for joining us.
My pleasure. Thank you so much.
Have a great week.
You too.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.